Hello, California, and welcome to this week's episode of Your Financial Compass, brought to you by the team of Bulman Wealth Group. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio, we have the founder, Chris Bulman, and financial advisor, Scott Bulman. The title of today's show is Income is the Outcome. Do you have a solid income plan in place for your retirement? Chris, Scott, as always, I'm excited to be here with you and have this conversation with you today.
Before that conversation, another one that's important is you asked, you're a big Taylor Swift fan, and so is my daughter who's 10, and you asked how many times she'd seen the Eras Tour movie, which you saw live. She's watched like 5 times, it's 3 hours. Chris and his boys have watched it 6 times. So she hasn't seen as much as
they don't even know who Taylor Swift is. So.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, actually, they do because they're Chiefs fans. So because of Travis,
well,
you know,
there you go.
A lot of women have learned about football,
right?
Or gotten involved in football.
And guys still complain about it. I want my wife to like football. Then they like it now. Well, not because of that.
Or not the Chiefs.
Yeah, or not the Chiefs, yeah.
Well, we need to talk about income, though, right? I know.
We
could sit here and talk all day about
Yeah.
a host of other subjects, but here's the reality. A lot of folks get really used to earning a paycheck during their working years, and the challenge is that once you hit retirement, you now need to pay yourself. And success in retirement isn't so much to do with the lump sum you've accumulated, although of course that does play a factor and can be important, but rather your ability to take that amount of wealth and turn it into a reliable, ongoing, steady stream of income that will pay you for the rest of your lives. And I think this, folks not knowing how to do this is what contributes to that number one fear of most retirees, which is running out of money. So my first question for you guys today is, what are some of the biggest challenges you see folks facing when they try to engage in this income planning process on their own?
Figuring out where the money's coming from. Because like you just said, for most folks that aren't business owners, they've been used to being paid by someone all these years. It's kind of on autopilot. They get paid, money goes to here, pays for benefits, pays for money into 401k. But then you reach a stage where you are the employee or employer in a sense, and you have to turn that money that you've hopefully saved into a stream of income. So it's figuring out how to turn that into income. What is Social Security going to pay me? Pensions are not really a thing anymore, or not nearly as much of a thing. Back in the early 80s, 80% of people had them. I think now the stats say like 15%. So that old pensions are just kind of, I want to say out of style because there is a value to them, but you don't see them as often.
We have a lot of clients with pensions, and you have to understand how does your other income fit in as well.
Right.
I mean, pensions are like gold. If you have a pension, because it just keeps paying. If you needed $200,000 a year of income, or if you got $200,000 from your pensions, that'd be like having over $4 million in a nest egg that paid you $200,000 a year, over maybe $4.5 million. So they are like gold, but definitely the younger crowd's not going to see a lot of pensions going forward.
Right.
And so to understand, the biggest thing that I think we see is how does it all fit together? We have a lot of people in California that own rental properties. And so we're going to have that income. We're going to have Social Security income. We're going to have our non-qualified accounts we've saved, in our E-Trade stock account or something, or maybe we have some other stock account. We have IRAs, but it's all a big puzzle. And it'd be nice if you had the board on the puzzle to show you how it all fits together. And that's really us. He's really boring, so we call him bored.
Well, I wasn't listening. Was he talking about me?
So putting that puzzle together is the challenge.
Have to be able to put that together, and a lot of us don't know how to do it. So sometimes when we're sitting across from folks, they literally, sometimes I can even forget. They say, okay, so what do we do next? And I'm like, well, now you have fun. Now you're retired, and we're going to have income. He goes, yeah, but like where? How oh yeah, sorry.
Right.
That's we have a whole plan for that here, and here's how it's going to start. Here's the month it's going to start. Here's how it's going to hit your account.
Right.
Here's where it's going to show up on your tax forms. All those things, but we do this every day. A lot of folks out there they don't know that next step from, going from all these puzzle pieces and income streams to now what happens.
And one thing it's not true in every case, but in a lot of instances, the myth is people going into retirement are going to pay less in taxes. It's generally not the case, because in your working years, some of your paychecks going towards, benefits or putting money into your work retirement plan. Well, those aren't a factor anymore because you're not having those deductions. So the paycheck can be bigger, in terms of if you're getting a pension or Social Security or pulling money out, which can in turn, pay more in taxes. So it's it's a good and bad thing, but
Right.
people are unaware of that, and it's just understanding also, it's probably a whole nother rabbit hole to jump down, is a budget.
Yep.
What do you need per month? We get the question all the time. It's like, well, how much can I get? Well, how much you need? If you need $5,000 a month to live comfortably, why do you want $8,000? You're just going to give a lot of that back in taxes. So it's just having a better grasp of what the necessary needs are
Right.
to meet once.
And it's
a
a change it's a paradigm shift, right? You
Right.
spend your whole life trying to accumulate
Save.
wealth,
Yep.
save, invest, grow, save, invest, grow, rinse and repeat. To now, you already have it. It's already grown. Now what do? Now we just want to take the parts out that we need to spend.
Right.
And sometimes, like Scott was saying, there's certain things in your paycheck. Let's say you're used to living on $200,000 a year of income, but of that 200, you're putting 30,000 in your 401k, 30,000 in your spouse's. You're funding your IRAs. So really, you're living on and then benefits. So you're living on maybe 100. But then you come and you sit down and say, oh, how are we going to get $200,000 a year? Well, you don't need that anymore.
Need it.
Right.
Because now we're not investing.
Right.
Now we're letting our investments grow, and we're only taking the income that we need,
Yeah.
which puts us potentially in a different tax bracket. Most often not, because then Social Security kicks in, RMDs kick in,
Yes.
and you're usually, if you've developed any wealth at all or income streams, you're going to be in a
Right.
similar tax bracket that you've always been.
Well, clearly so many pieces go into building this income planning puzzle, and you guys do this day in and day out for folks. I think the reason why a lot of people can be overwhelmed is you're only going to retire one time, right? This is your first time navigating through all of this, and on top of that, you have the challenges of market volatility, of accounting for inflation, the different tax risks, legislative changes. You have sequence of returns risk, which I know we'll get into later on in the show. I have some statistics though to share. This comes from the 2023 Schroeder's U.S. Retirement Survey. They surveyed 2,000 U.S. investors nationwide to learn more about the state of retirement readiness and planning, and a lot of folks' key concerns regarding retirement. 49% said that they do not have a retirement income strategy, that they plan to just take money from their accounts when they need it. 57% said they are concerned about not having regular paychecks in retirement, and 23% said that they were terrified. That's heartbreaking for those of us who are in this to see, because we know that a plan can make all the difference. And so I have seen one of two things typically happen when folks don't have a plan, and I'm curious what your take is on it. Either people overspend because they don't know, right? And then they could potentially run into that risk of running out of money. Or equally as tragic is they don't spend any money at all.
Yeah.
And they don't enjoy those years right out of retirement when they can go do the things they want to do because they're so fearful of running out of money. Do you find that to be the
Yeah,
case?
because you're flying blind. If you're not following a plan or even have a plan to see, as you said, we either don't factor it in and then we run out of money at age 80 and like, uh-oh, now what? But we see it probably even more so, and some of it might be generational, is where you've built all this money, you set it aside, it's like, well, I don't want to spend it because I don't want to,
Right.
I don't want to run out. My wife and I were gifted this nice bottle of wine for a special occasion, and it's like, let's open it. When is it ever going to be special enough when it sits there forever?
Right.
I think a lot of people do that with this
Yeah.
bucket of money that they save. It's like, well, I don't want to touch it because what if I need it 10 years from now? Well, we might be around 10 days from now. So
Right.
if you have a plan to see, or we run a plan and I'll show someone, well, you're going to die with $10 million. I know you love your kids. Do you want to leave them that much? Well, no, because we have a house and all these other things. We'll spend more.
Right.
So
Enjoy
it's like,
it, yeah.
it's giving people the authority to spend more.
But sometimes
permission.
sometimes when you tell them, you can spend more, they say, well, we don't like travel. We traveled when we were younger. Okay, well, what do you like? Well, we're good. We live on $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and we really don't want to spend anymore. Okay, now it gets into a deeper conversation on what really are your goals. Do you want to give money to a school? Do you want to give money to your kids, a charity? Let's really dig in and identify where we want the money to go.
Right.
Sometimes expenses can come up that we didn't forecast. So forecasting is big. I always want people to think about, okay, you have kids, they're in their 20s. If you have girls, are you going to pay for the wedding?
Right.
If you have boys, are you going to pay for the rehearsal dinner? And if so, let's just estimate when that might happen. So
Right.
5 years from now, let's $50,000 for the wedding.
Yep.
10 years from now, $40,000 for the rehearsal dinner. Whatever it might be.
Right.
We'll come up with a number together. But at least now we've forecasted, we've planned for it, and things aren't going to catch us off guard. How old's your roof? Okay, 15 years from
Or
now,
vehicle purchase.
we're going to need a new roof. And if you can't think of anything, we add what's called a slush fund. because something will come up in your life.
Yep.
And so maybe we want to forecast a slush fund of $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year, something like that, just to cover costs that may come up.
Right.
And now when we've accounted for that and people say, oh wow, so I'm still going to die if I live to 90 with $14 million. And that's with me spending an extra $38,000 a year on stuff that I don't even know I'm going to spend because we've built that in. Yeah, that gives you permission and freedom to go and live your life the way you want to. And if you're not going to go spend money, let's identify where the money's going to go and build a plan for that.
Right, absolutely. Well, I know there's so much more to talk about on this important subject of income planning. If someone's watching right now and maybe they can actually relate to those stats that I shared and they're going, yeah, you know, I've never thought through these things, I've never done this before, I'm not sure how all these pieces fit together, what would you want to say to them?
You're not alone.
Yeah.
A lot of folks feel that way. If you're you know, want to have a conversation, you're a little afraid, we try to make it very easy just to have a talk. That's where we start, is just to have a conversation, to find out more about you. As Chris was saying, what are your goals? I always like to say, what keeps you up at night concerned? What gets you up in the morning excited? If we can address those and figure out ways to check those boxes, the rest falls into place. So that's something we can't even get there until we start with a conversation to then see, do we want another conversation? Where does that lead us? So you're not alone. We can help. Call the number. Click on the little QR code and schedule a time to talk.
Wonderful. Scott, Chris, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, that number to call to receive your complimentary financial compass review from Chris and Scott and the team of Bulman Wealth is there on the bottom of your screen. Simply call 888-970-4685. Or if you have your smartphone handy but you'd rather not talk to someone right now, don't worry, we've got you covered. As Scott said, you can simply pull it out, open up that camera app, point, click, and scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from Bulman Wealth Group will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary financial compass review that way as well. Don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more to cover regarding this important subject of income planning for your retirement. Stay with us.
As Americans, we strive for better. From a better house to a better career to a better life for our kids. Better has become the American way, but when it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? More income? A flexible lifestyle? Better solutions? A better retirement begins with a plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
Imagine not having to face your retirement journey with the same old corporate solutions just like everyone else. In these economic times, you deserve a fresh perspective that includes a personalized income plan and a tax map from independent fiduciary advisors who focus on you. Call the number that you see here. Schedule your complimentary review right now.
Welcome back. You're watching Your Financial Compass, brought to you by the team of Bulman Wealth Group. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with both Chris Bulman and Scott Villan. We are talking today all about income. Do you have a solid income plan in place for your retirement? And if not, how you can get started even today. You don't have to go this alone, as you were saying before, Scott. You know, I'm curious, how do you guys even start? When someone comes in for the first time, maybe they haven't done any income planning yet, where do you even begin to help build a solid plan for someone?
Well, the first thing that we do, as we've mentioned before, is the first meeting is just to talk. We're not getting into planning, we're not getting into investments, like where it should go, is just to get a snapshot of where you're at, what your concerns are, the things you're looking forward to, what have you. And then we decide, do we want to have a second meeting, if we're fit to do that? And in a second meeting is where we start to delve into that. So one of the areas where we start with an income plan is, no one likes to do a budget, but we send out a form just to be a catalyst to see, we need to get at least an idea of what are the basic necessities, like do you need $5,000 a month to cover just the basics? And then we start from there and then find out, okay, a lot of our clients want a vacation budget, maybe for 5, 10, 15 years. We can bundle that in, or as Chris said earlier, a slush fund. We have to first cover the basics, then what are the kind of offshoots or the satellites to that? And then we start to understand, okay, well, really, you probably need $8,000 a month. Then we have to start figuring out, where is it going to come from? Is it coming from pension, Social Security, investment accounts, rental income, all the above? But with income, you can't just say, well, I need $8,000 now. Well, obviously inflation, 8,000 now, the equivalent of that in 5-10 years might be 10,000, 11,000. So we have to bake in the inflation to that too, or else we're setting ourselves up for disaster. So inflation is worked into it as we keep manicuring the plan. Taxes, what kind of rate of return are we expecting? A lot of times we'll see, well, I want to get the best rate of return I need, or that I can get. But when we run a plan, you might only need a 4% return to make everything work, 4% return on your investments. And what that allows us to do is we don't have to shoot for the moon and put your stuff in super aggressive things.
Risky, right.
Yeah, it's like, why would you risk, I forget the Warren Buffett quote, why would you risk what you need for something you don't need, or whatever?
Yeah, why risk what you have
Yeah.
for something that you don't even need?
Exactly.
So it's understanding what do we need, and then, hey, we only need to earn 4%. Wow, that takes a lot of pressure off your investments. We can be, if a little bit more conservative with it, because as we've said before too, generally people's risk tolerance has changed as they're segueing into retirement.
And even more importantly, their risk capacity,
Yeah.
right? Like even though they might have been people who've taken lots of risk tolerance in the past, when you get older, you can't afford to lose because you don't have that time on your side anymore.
Yeah, and some people that call us, you may call us and say, we're good at building wealth, but we're not good at managing it. We have a tendency to go spend money. We don't know where it goes. We make a lot of money, but we just don't, and we've built a lot, but we don't know where it goes. And that's where having a person who does this every day, we talk, and sometimes we identify, okay, you think you spend $10,000 a month, but if you did, you should have $8,000 extra every month to invest. Do you have that? No, we're month to month. Well, something's off,
Yeah,
right?
something-
You
Right.
must not be spending $10,000 a month. You must be spending 18. So then we start to identify, and they say, well, we did redo the bathroom last year. That was 50,000. We did the roof before. That was 50,000. We did, we redid the whole yard. That was 120,000. I say, okay, now we understand where all this money is going. Are there any big projects in the future, right? And we start, again, forecasting, identifying. And then as we're working with folks and they start to understand where their money actually is going, because sometimes, especially if you make a lot of money, a lot of our clients make a lot of money, it just goes and they don't know where. As we start to take account of where the money's going, forecast where money will go in the future, that all plays into that income plan and gives them peace of mind, removes the uncertainty, removes the fear. Just identifying where your money's going makes people go, oh, wow, we'd be fine if we just stopped doing this.
It's like an inventory, and that's part of, we don't have to call it a budget. We can just take an inventory. I remember, I always laugh because Chris will have me come look at his Apple account. He's like, you've been subscribed to all these things for 5 years, paying for it. You didn't even know you had it. It's kind of along those lines, like, well, you go to the gym once a month. Why do you have a membership? Or you don't even read that magazine anymore. Or you don't read the newspaper. All these little things we can trim out.
They all add up.
Yeah, because we don't want to be bean counters either. No one wants that.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, no one wants to be eating ramen noodles at the end of the month because they spent too much. So it just first have to grasp where the money's going, then we can get a better idea and just get a handle on things a bit better.
I want to go back to those stats I shared earlier about how so many folks don't even have a retirement income plan in place. I know that there's a rule of thumb out there, if you will, that I think a lot of folks have heard or thought, okay, I guess that's what I do to give myself income in retirement. Something known as the 4% rule. Let's talk about why that's so outdated and not really, that doesn't provide a solid income strategy for someone in retirement.
Yeah, it's become a bit archaic, and there's been several very dense books written about it that dispute it, which, trust us, we've read them and we'll pass along the info. You don't need to bore yourself with it. But it's proven that, with the way inflation has changed, the way taxes have changed, people's income, or people's, I think, asset structures become more sophisticated. So just pulling 4% from your investment account alone doesn't carry the same weight. And if we want it, and people are living longer, that might have worked when the average age was 80, now it's 83, 84, people living up into their 90s. It doesn't map out, and it doesn't address that fear of running out of money. So it's like, times change, and so do some of those numbers. So the 4% rule is proven, in our opinions.
Meaning, in 4% rule, we should define what that is. It's saying that if you just take 4% out of your investments over your lifetime per year, you'll be okay. And
you should be okay, and your income will always rise, and you'll have more money when you die than today. It's not quite that simple. And the person who wrote the rule initially kind of came back out, and now it's the 2.8% rule. So things are always changing. I think that you hear these commercials about, HR. Why have an HR team? You can just pay $99 a month and have HR at your disposal. You can call this number and they'll always give you advice. If you don't have a financial advisor, that's the role we play. We're there for you. You don't have to worry about all these things and stress out.
Right.
All you have to do is show up to your quarterly or every 6-month meeting, and we talk about all these things. We get them off your chest. We have some clients, and this is always what energizes me to keep going. Some clients I was talking to, this gentleman is just retiring, actually. I'm excited for them. But he always had to leave at 8 o'clock. So I would have to come in, have a meeting with them at 7 a.m. With the wife. And I mean, that's really our role, is to remove that fear and uncertainty. Make sure you have a plan. Make sure you understand your plan. Make sure you know what can get in the way of the plan. And we love doing it.
Yep, and it can be adjusted accordingly according to what happens with life. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris Scott, thank you so much. If you are out there listening and you know that you need to have a solid income plan in place, the good news is you don't have to go this alone. They do this routinely for people, and they would love to help and serve you. That number to call to get your complimentary financial compass review and start your path to building a solid income plan is there on the bottom of your screen, 888-970-4685. Or again, you're also welcome to scan that QR code, and that will get you connected as well. More on Your Financial Compass right after this.
The team at Bulman Wealth Group is exceptional. From our advisor team to our service team, which is, I think, second to none. We invest a lot into that part of our office as well, because we want people to know, how we feel about them. But it all revolves around the idea that our clients are vitally important.
There's so many different financial advisors. There's so many folks that they can choose to work with. So one of the ways I feel like we differentiate ourselves is we want a relationship with our clients. And I really learned that from Chris. Is there's so many dollars and cents and all this information to know, but at the end of the day, it's got to be a trust and a like, because we're partnering with somebody. So I want them to think a trip to see me is not a trip to the DMV or to the dentist, but it's just being able to share in the good times and be available to be a resource in the bad times too. So at the end of the day, just boiling it down to the relationship is really important to us.
Welcome back, California. You're watching Your Financial Compass. I'm Kristen Oakley here with both Chris Bulman and Scott Bulman. We've been talking today all about income. It is so important to have a solid income plan in place for your retirement. And there's two things that I would love for you to touch on as we've talked about building an income plan. One is, how do you factor inflation into that plan? Because obviously that's at the top of everyone's minds. And then also, I think a huge source of stress for most retirees or people thinking about retirement is planning for healthcare costs, long-term care costs, especially when you don't know if you're going to need it. So let's talk about how the income plans you build for folks address those two factors.
So with inflation, it's out. We've talked about it for years because we know it's a thing. It became mainstream, arguably, back in 2022
recently,
when my mom reaches out, Scotty, inflation, it means it's gone mainstream, and it was up over 8%. The thing is, I always say it's kind of like they say blood pressure is a silent killer. With health, inflation, I would argue, is kind of the silent killer with finances, because we always want to retain what's called purchasing power. If we need $5,000 today to spend per month, to get the equivalent of that in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that number always goes up. So we've always factored it into a plan generally around a 3% range, because that's about the historical average over decades. So that's what we bake into when we're building a plan in terms of the expense structure is, adding that 3% increase each year, then at least we get out ahead of it, and we know that, hey, that $5,000 we need a month now is $8,000 in a decade. So as long as our plan accounts for that, and we can run plans to show, hey, you want to run at 4% inflation or maybe 4% for the next few years, we can run various iterations, but kind of a rule of thumb has been 3% when we bake it in.
Good to know for sure, because yeah, you're right. People are much more aware of it, even though it's always been around. But I think that's a huge stressor when you realize, okay, my cost of living could double very, very quickly.
Yeah, I will call out usually our biggest expense for a lot of us, outside of healthcare eventually, is our house. And so the good news is, if you have a 30-year mortgage and you've locked it in, there's no inflation on that. I mean, other than all the utilities and everything else, but at least your mortgage is going to stay flat, until you pay it off. So I think that's gives us some hope. But everything else, get as simple as you want in your life. Think of something that you buy today. Other than like technology, TVs, they seem to always get less expensive over time. But a cheeseburger, I always go back to cheeseburgers. I have 4 sons.
Here it goes.
Cheeseburgers today at the golf course we go to, with tax and tip, it's $28.
It's crazy.
It's mind-blowing.
For one burger?
For a burger.
Wow.
It's a
You
good
need to
burger.
find a different
but
place.
$28 for a burger.
That's
So,
crazy.
but if you go back, I can remember the first time I'd moved from the Midwest. I went to Pebble Beach, and I didn't play there. I just went there, and Sarah, my wife, and I had a cheeseburger. It was $15, and I can remember going, that was a good burger. I don't know if it was a $15 burger, but that was a good burger, because back then burgers were at a fancy place $7, $8.
Right. Yep.
Now they're $18 at McDonald's.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, what is happening?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so if a burger's doing that price-wise,
Right.
what's going to happen to everything else in your life? Your HOA dues, you know, for whatever neighborhood you live in, if you have those, your electric
Car
bills.
insurance went up 22% year over year.
Fire
Car
insurance in California. Now you have to have
Yes.
fire insurance
Yeah.
if you live in any of
Yeah.
these zones. So now your insurance for your home, instead of being $2,000 a year, $10,000 a year.
Yep.
So we need to make sure we're factoring those in. That's why forecasting, having that income plan, taking all of those different pieces and putting them in there, and then brainstorming on what else could come up, it's so important to know.
And also, one thing to mention is there's people watching this that might already be retired. They retired 5 years, 10 years ago, 2 months ago. I guarantee they've raised an eyebrow over the last few years when they saw all these expenses shooting
Sure.
up. Like, oh gosh, maybe I need to readdress this. So
Yeah.
don't always just rest on your laurels for a plan you set up 5 years ago, because with
needs to be
inflation,
updated.
we need to kind of readjust
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and just to go back to what we were saying earlier about interest rates, and if you have money sitting in an account, 200,000, 300, 400,000, getting 0 or 0.02, just by moving that and being a little bit smarter about that, move it to an account that's getting 5% in your bank even. There's an extra $800 or $1,000 a month that can go to pay those bills that you're currently not getting just because you're not attuned to it.
Right.
And again, that's where we can help.
Absolutely. Well, clearly, obviously, so much goes into building a solid income plan for folks, and we didn't even have time to really talk about the healthcare and long-term care aspect, but I know that you build that in for folks as well.
Absolutely.
Chris, share lastly how folks can connect with you even if they don't live close by to your offices.
Yeah, so first of all, pick up the phone, 888-970-4685. You can click the QR code, which I love to point, but I don't know where it is.
We're running out of time, Chris. Speed it up.
You can meet with us in person, over the phone, or on Zoom. We love to connect with you, whatever makes sense to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Scott. And thank you for joining us. We love you, California. We look forward to being back with you next time here at Your Financial Compass.